Hi, welcome to Russ's Kitchen. Now, people have been making bread for thousands of years. In fact, one of the earliest records of bread making goes back 12,000 years ago. So it's one of our most important foodstuffs, and it has been so important for that long, and it still is so important to us today. Why not make your own bread? It's not as difficult as some people would probably like to tell you. I've read up on a lot of bread making, and very often you get people will say it takes time, don't expect the first one to be right, it's an art form. Really, it doesn't have to be. I've got a recipe here that's a really basic, simple white bread recipe, easy to follow, easy to make, and believe me, give it a go and you'll probably be quite surprised and really pleased at just how well this works out. So first of all, let's have a look at the ingredients, and there's not many of them, so that's a good start. I've got strong bread flour, 450 grams, that I've sifted into this bowl. It has to be strong bread flour. I've got 1.5 teaspoons of yeast, 1 teaspoon of sugar, a tablespoon of olive oil, and a teaspoon of salt. So straight away you can see we're cutting down on the sugar, we're cutting down on the salt. There's no artificial ingredients are going into this. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous. And to mix it all together, about 250 ml of warm, tepid water. So let's get mixing this bread together. So the first thing that we need to do is incorporate our dry ingredients into the flour. So yeast, salt and sugar all going in. And then with my hand, I'm just going to make a little well in the centre of that flour. And then we're going to put in our wet ingredients. So the olive oil, make sure you don't use extra virgin olive oil, just normal light olive oil for that. Extra virgin olive oil is just going to be too much of a strong taste. And then with our tepid water, we're going to start incorporating that tepid water, and then with your hand, we're going to mix that together. Now, I haven't put all of that water in just as yet. We may need to add a little bit more, but let's just go with a little bit at first, just to see how it starts coming together. And then, of course, we can always add a little bit more. What we're trying to avoid doing this is having to add more flour, because once we start adding more flour, the quantities start to get unbalanced, and it's not really going to work. So more water as we go and keep mixing. We can always add a little bit more water than 250 ml if we need to. Now, once the dough is starting to come together, we need to now knead this for at least 10 minutes so that it now becomes nice and smooth. You can get your knuckles in, be quite rough with it. And if it does start to stick too much, instead of putting more flour in, you can just run some olive oil just a little bit over your fingers, and that will just help it not to stick. So our dough has now become nice and tight, a little bit elastic, so I'm happy now to let this go into its first stage of proving. Now, you could have actually kneaded that dough on a lightly floured surface. If you find that easier, then that might be a good idea to try that the first time. But for me, saving a little bit of washing up as well, I like to keep it just in this one bowl. So we're now going to cover this with a clean tea towel. I'm going to let that prove for about an hour. Now, depending on how warm it is in your house. That may take slightly longer than an hour, but let's pop the tea towel on, give it an hour, and we'll see what we've got. The bread dough has now pretty much doubled in size, and it's taken about an hour and 20 minutes in this kitchen because it's actually a little bit cooler than it would normally be. But about an hour in a nice warm place should be about right. It's now time to knock this dough back, so a little bit more kneading on a lightly floured surface, not too much flour again, we don't want to upset the balance. So let's get this knocked back. Now, as you can see, that dough now has become nice and smooth, nice and springy. So I'm going to form it into a shape that hopefully will now fit into our loaf tin. Trying to keep it fairly uniform in size. Yeah, that should be about right. Into the loaf tin. Again, trying to make sure that it's nice and even. Now, with the loaf tin, all I've done is I've run some olive oil, just a little bit, inside the loaf tin and then dusted it with a little bit more flour. What we're going to do now is leave this for another half hour so that it can go through its second stage of proving. So the second proving has now taken place. It's been about half an hour and you can already see how much extra that has risen in the tin. I've dusted the top with a little bit of flour and I've just made a very, very light cut across the top with a very, very sharp knife. Now, into the oven at a temperature of about 220, preheated, and that's going to take approximately 30 minutes, maybe 35 minutes to cook. Just keep an eye on it, because if you are using a fan assisted oven, that might actually only take 25 minutes. So here we go into the oven with our bread. And there we go, it's a homemade loaf of bread. As I said at the very beginning, less sugar, less salt than supermarket bought bread. So satisfying making it yourself. It smells amazing, and you can treat yourself by letting it cool down a little bit, slicing some warm bread with some butter. Nothing better than that. You do need to give this a try. I know it takes a little bit of time, but look at that, it's really worth it.